G'day. So we're looking at something I found yesterday. 3 in the same place. Again, obviously someone's offloaded these all at once. 3 George Michael albums. And to be honest, I'm not the hugest George Michael fan. I think I have one of his greatest hits collections already, but at the same time, I like some of his songs, and he's not someone I've listened to extensively to, so I thought I'd pick these up. These were $2 each, so a little bit more than usual, but still $2 for 3 pretty well-known albums is not bad. So chronologically, this one here was it Listen Without Prejudice, Volume 1, and this was his second solo album. So his first solo album was Faith, and that kind of was massive, sold tens of millions of albums around the world, and in America he made sold 10 million copies there. And this was after Faith. I think it was 90, sorry. Faith was 87, this was 1990. And I guess the big song from this was Freedom. Freedom 90. No one calls it Freedom 90, do they? They just go Freedom. But also the other singles were, I think, that first one, Praying for Time, Waiting for That Day, which wasn't that big a single. Apparently, Waiting for That Day, he has writing credits on it with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards because it sounds so similar to Can't Always Get What You Want, I think. No, one of those songs. One Rolling Stone song. So he didn't write it with them. Yeah, Can't Always Get What You Want. But he felt it was similar enough that he had to give a writing credit, otherwise risk being sued. Now this album was huge as well, but in America it wasn't as huge. I think it sold a fraction of, it didn't sell 10 million albums in America. It sold less than that. It still sold millions, but not 10 millions. And so the record company, which I think was Sony, was it Sony? Epic isn't it? I think Epic is a Sony imprint. We talked about this before, how I never understand all those. Anyway, whoever it was disappointed in it, and George Michael felt that they hadn't supported the album enough, which you hear a lot of famous musicians say that. Oh, the album didn't do well because the record company didn't back it and didn't do marketing properly. And you think, if a record company isn't supporting George Michael in 1990, at that time, genuinely one of the biggest pop stars in the world, he would be in the list, wouldn't he? Michael Jackson, him, Prince, a few others, Madonna. At that time, if they're not backing him, who are they backing? Who are they giving support to? Because so you were saying, was that just an excuse? The album is a bit different, as in that it doesn't. Faith, I haven't listened to the whole album of Faith. I've heard the singles of it, but apparently Faith was more acoustic based, whereas this one is more orchestrated with synths and strings and piano. And was that the reason why it didn't do as well? Who knows? Faith by itself was a huge song, and sometimes that's all it takes for an album to sell, extraordinarily well as one massive song. Here he is, handsome young man. So that started a kind of war he had with his record company thereafter. So there was a 6-year gap between this and the next album, Older, which 6 years between an album when you are at the height of your career is pretty huge. And I think it was, he was trying to get out of his contract. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but that's why there was such a large gap. Now this one has a very 90s sound. A lot of drum machine, electric drums, I don't know what else you call them. A lot of kind of that 90s R&B beat sound. Also, even I'd say a little bit of kind of trip hop sound that he's taken. Cheers to a Child is probably the biggest song. Now that was more just a ballad, like a vocal ballad, which he sung about his partner who died of AIDS, HIV/AIDS. I don't know exactly, but he had a partner who passed away, and some people say he never recovered from that, and that all his troubles thereafter, you know, his personal troubles, drug abuse and trouble with the law, could all be traced back to the loss of that relationship. I don't know if that was true. You know, I don't know much about him, but yeah. Fast Love, Older, other singles. Again, really got that 90s R&B sound to them. His voice is still at the forefront. His voice is still the focus of his music. Oh, there we go. That case is missing a lower tab, and the booklet's a little bit munched. The disc itself is a little bit dusty, but looks fine. You see down there it says, "Thank you for waiting." So he acknowledges the 6-year gap, which isn't normal. See, this is hard to get out because it's so munched. Yeah, make it more munched by getting it out. So there's changed his hairdo. He's got one of those push forward, I don't know what you call it, push forward hairdos we used to call it when I was at school. Ross from Friends had one like that. Oh, it's a real photo shoot, isn't it? He's featured on every goddamn page. Sitting on the chair, as you do. Come on. This is a little bit over the top, George. Gregorius, I think he's Greek. His father was Greek, at least. His mother was English, but he has his real name, his birth name, I should say, is a full-on Greek. Gregorius. I don't know how to say his surname, but it's a long, very Greek-sounding name. And this album he did, you see here, Virgin and Aegean. Now I don't know if Aegean is his own imprint, his own label, because Aegean is the sea next to Greece, isn't it? And it sounds like something he might choose to use. And also you notice the AE, I don't know what that's called, but he uses the AE on the previous album to spell his name. That kind of AE. I think it's used in the Greek alphabet. I might be wrong. I might be showing my complete lack of knowledge over there as well. Does he use it on them? No, he doesn't. Gave it up. But anyway, this album again was sold tens of millions of albums, but it wasn't as big as the previous two before it. Kind of each progressive album after Faith sold less, which isn't surprising because Faith was just such a massive album. It's most bands don't replicate, or artists don't replicate their huge, super duper multi-million seller, do that. And it's just ridiculous that record companies expect that to go on forever. And then if it doesn't, it, you know, I guess that's the name of the game. There's one album between Older and this. I can't remember what it's called, but this one would have been the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th album, Patience. Songs from the Last Century was after Older, which is from 1999. This is from 2004. This one, just listening to it now, his voice sounds a lot less processed and a lot less studio trickery, or not trickery, but a lot of studio effect on his voice. It sounds a lot more naked and natural, at least the quick listen through that I had of it, which is a good thing. Patience, I think, was the single, and Shoot the Dog, which is the song he wrote about or at least the video was about the Iraq War and Tony Blair's cozying up with George Bush and all that. but again, you know, his voice, it's always about George Michael. It's always going to be his voice as the focus of the songs, isn't it? And he had a pretty amazing voice. He had amazing vocal control, not just like belting it out. He Frank Sinatra apparently said, there's a quote from him saying he thought George Michael was one of the greatest singers of the 20th century, which is pretty amazing. Came from Frank Sinatra. So he passed away in 2016. George Michael, not Frank Sinatra. He'd gone about 20 years before. But everything I read about him, he sounded like a nice guy, a troubled guy, but a nice guy. And you don't know, all you really know is what you read or hear in the newspapers or, you know, gossip magazines. So it seemed like he did have a lot of run-ins with the police. Over relatively, falling asleep at the wheel seemed to be a big thing. It seemed like every other week he was falling asleep. The police found him sleeping behind the wheel. He crashed into a corner shop, asleep at the wheel. He fell out of a car on the motorway. Remember that one? That was, don't know what happened there. He got pneumonia and almost died. But he also sounded like a good person. Like after he died, it came out that he'd been supporting lots of charities to the tune of millions of dollars per year, and, you know, not publicizing it. It was just what he did. And then after he died, it all came out, oh, he was the one that kept this thing going or that thing going. Or he would secretly give money. There was a story which people have probably heard before, where he was watching some TV game show, and the woman, the contestant, said she wanted the game show prize money to get IVF treatment to have a baby. And George Michael was sitting at home watching this, and the woman lost in the game show, but he contacted the TV company and gave her the money anyway, gave her the £15,000 to go through the treatment. He was a supporter of workers' movements in the 1980s, like miners' strikes. His dad was a communist, apparently. And yeah, which, yeah, I don't know, is that really neither here or there, I guess. But he was certainly an amazing musical talent, and more than that, he wrote 90% of his music. You go through the track listings of his things and the writing credits. He had a few writing partners. There was one particular guy, I think it was David Austin. I saw his name come up again and again. Apparently he knew him from when he was young. He used to busk with him in the underground. But he wasn't like getting teams of songwriters and like so many of these you know, huge megastar artists. He was a true musical talent. So yeah, 3 CDs for $6. George Michael, rest in peace, fella. And thank you for watching.